the Curzon Cinema here in Soho. We're at Human Rights Festival. It's been going on for the last week or so. We're joined by Andrea Holley from Human Rights Watch. Andrea, what's the importance of having a Human Rights Festival as opposed to your normal outlets of information, the reports you do using mainstream media? What's important about having a festival like this to get your message across?
Human Rights Watch created the festival 23 years ago. And the main thinking behind it, there were two levels. One was external and one was internal. The external level is just to raise awareness about human rights issues beyond what we might consider the traditional circles of advocacy organizations and other charities who work on those issues. The internal decision had to do with the fact that the reports we write generally focus on the macro level, the policies that are involved in certain countries, statistics in many cases, and there are testimonies in our reports, but not quite the same sort of personal stories you see in our films. So the idea behind the film festival was to put truly individual stories and emotion behind a lot of the statistics and reporting that you see generally with human rights.
And so the films that you've chosen, or you've curated essentially, do you have any input in the creation of the films, in terms of commissioning, or do you just see what's out there and say, this covers a nice broad section of geographical areas and subjects? How do you choose them?
Right. It's an interesting question because people are very curious how the film festival is curated. Each year we see anywhere from 500 to 700 submissions. And we also travel to festivals, but we never have any pre-decided quotas or topics. It all comes from the pool of films in every given year. So the themes and the regions you see in any program are the byproduct of what sort of coalesced out of the existing pool. We do not produce any films and we do not commission any films. Each year it's just a question of what comes to us. We do have an internal vetting process, so people within the organization who cover these regions and topics do participate in the choices, but we don't actually produce any of them.
Which brings me to the next question. For documentary makers out there, do you welcome submissions from everyone? I mean, can they just send them through to you? How would they have a chance of having their films shown?
We do accept open submissions on our website, ff.hrw.org. There's a submissions page that explains the procedure, and you can send us an email through the site. There's just a form, and it's open to anyone, anywhere, and we take submissions in the autumn.
And is this a tour, a festival tour? Sort of what stage you're here in London at the moment? For other people watching around the world, this is on the internet, so people can be watching from anywhere. Where can they see you next?
Yes. Well, actually, it's interesting because London, for us, is generally the beginning of the film festival season. Many of the films we show for the first time here in London, and then the film festival occurs sometimes simultaneously, but more sequentially throughout the year in a number of cities, largely in North America. But we've also had smaller festivals in Nairobi, Beirut, and different cities in Europe. Generally speaking, it's wherever Human Rights Watch has an office or a presence.
Okay, and what would you like to people to sort of sign up to Human Rights Watch? We do see these films to rally troops to sign up, to people to pressure their governments to become angry. What sort of physical outcome would you like to see, or practical outcome amongst those who go and watch the films?
Right. We always have a couple different answers depending on the film and depending on the year. In some cases, what my ideal outcome would be is just for someone to learn more about something they saw in the film through whatever way. I mean, obviously we're talking about the internet. That's certainly one way. In many cases, we partner with other organizations who do work specifically on the issues we're talking about. So the first thing I want people to do is just learn more if they've been touched by one of the films. The other level to it is, obviously, we would welcome people's participation in the human rights movement in whatever fashion. Perhaps you join Human Rights Watch's mailing list. Perhaps you give some money to another charity. But I think the main thing we want people to do is think about, within your own world, within your own connections, with your own skills and resources, what can you do to make a difference about something you've seen that really made you feel passionately?
And finally, I imagine you've watched a lot of these films, if not all of them. I hope. All of them, yeah. So is there sort of some general lessons or assessment, analysis that you've made that the key problems in our society or in the world are?
Well, if I had isolated what the key problems in our society were, I probably wouldn't be doing this, would I? I'd be out solving them. I would say this. What we can tell you, it's funny because I just had a conversation last night with Paul Laverty, who's the screenwriter of one of the films, Even the Rain. One thing we do always talk about is that after all these years of showing films from all over the world about so many different countries and topics, the mechanisms of tyranny and oppression have more in common than they do differences. No matter what country we go to, something like the trafficking film we showed this year, The Price of Sex, it operates the same across the world. So there's these certain mechanisms we see over and over and over again, and if people can learn those lessons, I think we have a pathway towards resistance. The other thing I would say very specific to this year is we've chosen a set of themes that relate to how economic inequality has impacted human rights and injustices around the world. And that's more of an observational approach rather than an analytical approach. We leave it to our audience to analyze that relationship, but that's definitely something we've tried to highlight this year.
Okay, brilliant. And just a website, if people want to go and see where they can see the films, either in London or the next cities, where can they go?
ff.hrw.org, filmfestival.hrw.org. That's the web.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for joining us. This is Glenn McMahon here at the Human Rights Festival in London for Vision on TV.